Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We're here for another episode of Farm Fights, where we talk about controversies in the hobby farming world. That's a turkey. That's a turkey. Thank you, Blue. And sometimes we talk about things that are really controversial, and sometimes we talk about things that just make people in those online Facebook groups argue a little bit. So today we're talking about one that's not really that serious. We are talking about whether or not, if you are selling hatching eggs, should you replace eggs if the buyer tells you that they got a bad hatch rate? So it's not a serious issue, and it's not an issue that affects a lot of people, but it is still an issue, and you have people on both sides. And usually people's opinions will change the longer they've been a seller. So we're going to talk about best practices if you're a seller, best practices if you're a buyer, and we'll of course talk about my evolving stance on the issue. Now, I no longer sell hatching eggs, and I will talk about why throughout the video. I used to sell hatching eggs, and I no longer will sell them at all. I will give hatching eggs to my best friend for her to hatch, but I will not sell them. So don't ask. I don't sell my hatching eggs. So, how did I end up there? Well, that's where this conversation starts. So, first let's talk about if you are a seller. You are selling hatching eggs. That means, hi. That's just lonesome doing his chicken thing. But you're a seller of hatching eggs. If you're selling hatching eggs, what that means is that you are selling eggs that were collected from hens that are exposed to a rooster, and you expect that those eggs would be able to hatch under normal circumstances. And if you are selling hatching eggs that are specifically a certain breed, so I have silkies, I sell baby silkies, I don't sell the eggs, but I have silkies. So if I were going to sell my silky hatching eggs, I would have to tell people that yes, the hens are silkies and they are only exposed to a silky roux. Okay? That is what it means when you are selling a purebred hatching egg. If you're just selling backyard mix hatching eggs, just telling people that you have this many roux to this many hens is sufficient enough. Can I help you? He's back there. Don't ask. Then I have ducks behind me. They're waiting to see if I have snacks. I don't. If I brought snacks out, I'd get mobbed. Anyway, so as a buyer, your job is to fully disclose how many roosters you have, how many hens you have, and what breed those creatures are. Hi. It's turkey. Turkey that way. But that is your responsibility as a seller. You are guaranteeing that these eggs are from hens exposed to a rooster, and you are disclosing what breeds are involved. Okay. What about if you're a buyer? As a buyer, your job is to ask the right questions. Okay. You are buying hatching eggs, not chicks. Okay. There is no guarantee that those hatching eggs will turn into chicks. Though, of course, it's our expectation. I've bought many hatching eggs over the years. And yes, my expectation is that those hatching eggs turn into at least a decent portion of chicks. That's, you're hoping, right? That's your goal. Otherwise, why would you buy them? But your responsibility is to ask certain questions. If the seller says they have backyard mix, thank you, Blue. If your seller says they have backyard mix and you're fine with backyard mix, but you really don't want backyard mix if there's any silkies in the flock, your job is to ask. Okay? Your job is to say, okay, I really would love some backyard mix as long as there aren't any silkies in the mix. That's your job. If you don't ask that, and then at hatch, you're like, man, some of these look like they're part silky, and then you get upset, that's on you. They told you they were backyard mix. Okay? Another good practice, if you're a buyer, is to talk to someone who has bought hatching eggs from that person before. Okay? Because, yes, there are people who are dishonest. There are also people who just make mistakes. So it's a good idea to talk to other people who have bought eggs, that's my dolly right behind me, by the way. But it's a good idea to talk to people who have eggs that from that same buyer, that same seller, and have hatched them successfully. So that you kind of have an idea, especially if you're buying backyard mix, you kind of want to know. Okay? And your responsibility of this as the buyer is to be informed. So you need to understand that you are buying hatching eggs, not live chicks. So if you're buying hatching eggs, not live chicks, you have to listen to Blue talk. Are you done? Everyone has to stop and listen to Blue talk. But if you are buying the hatching eggs, you have a responsibility to do some basic research and have a basic understanding of what you're buying. There's no guarantee of live chicks. There is no guarantee of male-female ratio. And a heck of a lot of those myths that you've heard are just that, myths. Okay? It doesn't matter what shape the egg is. Now, a good seller would sell eggs that are roughly the same size and shape, that are relatively clean, though not washed, and basically look like they are ready to go in the incubator. Your job as the buyer is to know that a heck of a lot of these myths hold no water at all. Okay? It doesn't matter what shape the egg is. There's no sense in you going, I only want round eggs or I only want pointy eggs because you got in your head somehow that controls the gender of the chick. It doesn't. Okay? It does not. So you definitely need to do a little homework yourself. You have to know what you're buying. You have to have a basic understanding of the breed you're buying. So if you buy silky hatching eggs and they hatch out and they have feathers on their legs and you're annoyed, well, that's on you because silkies are supposed to have feathered legs. So if you didn't check and you don't like feathered leg breeds, that's your fault. That's your problem. You should not be even bringing that up with the seller. You made a mistake. As the buyer, your job is to know what you're buying before you part with your money. Okay? So that not all of it is on the seller. You also have a responsibility to have an understanding of proper incubation techniques. Okay? I have entire playlists depending on if you're hatching chickens, turkeys, ducks, quail. I have entire playlists about that. So there is no excuse anymore to not know. You can read a book, you can watch some videos, you can look it up on the internet if you prefer to read. You can definitely look up proper incubation practices. It's also your responsibility, especially if you're paying good money for hatching eggs, to make sure you're following those practices. So let's, for example, say you don't really feel like turning your eggs and your incubator doesn't have an auto turner. So you stumbled upon a Facebook page where everyone does this no turn thing and they all say they have great success. And so you do it and you get a poor hatch rate. Well, that's not the seller's fault. That's your fault. You didn't follow proper incubation procedures. You also have to store the hatching eggs correctly. So if you left them in a hot car, noise over here. But if you left those eggs in a hot car over during the day while you were at work, so you pick them up on your way to work and you leave them in your hot car, your hatch rate's gonna suck. If you took them home and stuck them in the fridge, your hatch rate's gonna suck. If you took them home, washed them, put them in the fridge, didn't tell anybody, and they ate them, well, that's not the seller's fault. That's you. First of all, you shouldn't have washed them. You shouldn't have put them in the fridge. And you certainly shouldn't have stuck them in the fridge and then let your family eat them. So you spent good money on those eggs. Hatching eggs are not cheap. It's also your responsibility to know that you're not going to get your hatching eggs for $5. Okay? Hatching eggs are generally more expensive than eggs that you're going to eat. And that's important to know ahead of time because I sell eating eggs for $5 a dozen. I have no guarantee that, especially the bush chickens, most of the roosters live up here, and most of the hens live out in the bush, in the bush coop. So there is no guarantee that those hens out there have had any exposure to a rooster. You cannot assume they did. So when I sell those eggs for $5 a dozen, they're designed to be eaten. They are washed and they are refrigerated. Don't get on me. That's the law where I am. If you are selling eggs for human consumption, they have to be washed and refrigerated prior to sale. So I do that because I don't want to run afoul of local regulations. I make my money in part from selling eggs. I am not going to run afoul of regulation, okay? So I do wash and refrigerate before I sell eggs. If I'm selling those eggs and you stick them in your incubator, one, they were washed, two, they were in the fridge, three, there's no guarantee that the hens they came from were even really exposed to a rooster. So if you try to hatch those eggs and they don't hatch at all, and then you come at me and you're saying, well, they weren't fertile. Well, I didn't sell them to you as fertile eggs. I sold them to you as eating eggs. So it's really irrelevant that you couldn't hatch them because that's not what they were for. So it's your responsibility to know as a buyer that you are going to be paying a little more for hatching eggs, especially if they're purebred. Okay? Especially if they're purebred. And if you're not willing to pay that, then get yourself some chickens and get your own hatching eggs from your own flock. Okay? You are going to have to pay for decent hatching eggs. It's also your responsibility as the buyer to have a decent incubator. The number of people who buy a $20 incubator off of Temu and then have expensive hatching eggs shipped in, and shipping is another thing I'll talk about in a minute, and then complain when those eggs don't hatch or they only get one to hatch, well, you're lucky one hatched. Frankly, you have responsibilities as the buyer. So, on the other hand, back to the seller. Again, responsibility to disclose what kind of chickens they are, to disclose hen to roo ratio, because if you have a poor hen to roo ratio, you have too many hens and not enough roos, your fertility rate's probably going to be down in the dumps there. You also have a responsibility to do a test hatch before you offer any eggs for sale. Okay? You need to run a batch of at least 10 eggs through your incubator that you know works, and get at least an 85% hatch rate. Okay? You need to be able to tell people that. You need to be able to say, I get a 93% hatch rate here on the farm. My hatch rate for my own eggs that come off my own farm is roughly 95%. Okay? My own eggs. And that's averaging chickens, ducks, and quail. Now, the hatch rate is a little bit lower for ducks than chickens, so that's averaging everybody. So the hatch rate goes up for the chickens, a little bit down for the ducks. But if I average everybody, that's roughly what I get. Hi, guys. Birds. Birds that way, beside me. Anyway, that is your responsibility as the seller. Do a test hatch. And if you are shipping eggs, your responsibility is to pack them correctly. So that doesn't necessarily have to mean in foam shippers, though foam shippers are really nice. It can mean instead of foam shippers, you might wrap them in paper towel, put them in egg cartons, wrap the egg cartons in bubble wrap, and pack those egg cartons in packing peanuts, and then secure the box really well. There are a lot of different ways you can properly package hatching eggs, and it's all fine. Okay? It's fine. It doesn't matter. It's fine as long as you use one of the proper packing and shipping methods. No, you can't just put eggs in a box and ship them. You have to pack them. They have to be secured so they don't move and shake around. They should arrive unbroken. You should put fragile on the package. I know there are going to be people who say, well, you shouldn't mark it as fragile because if you mark it as fragile, it'll get kicked around more. That is not true. Okay? Could a fragile package get damaged? Of course. But it is not more likely to be targeted by postal workers. And if you are selling eggs that you are shipping, it's also your responsibility to not ship them when the weather is bad. So if it is too cold for hatching eggs, so if it's below freezing, eggs that freeze are not going to hatch. So you don't ship them if it's cold out. You don't ship them if it's hot out, because if they're sitting in the back of a hot truck for 2 days, they're going to roast. So as the seller, it's your responsibility to tell the buyer, I would love to sell you these hatching eggs. It's going to have to wait a few weeks because I can't ship them because it's too hot. So that's your responsibility as the seller. You can't put that one on the buyer, okay? Your responsibility is to know when and you can and cannot ship. Where we are, our postal service will not accept hatching eggs prior to March 1st because it's just too cold, okay? It is too cold to ship them. We're on the Canadian prairies. It's too cold to ship them. It's too cold to ship them in March. To be honest, I don't order hatching eggs until May because it is too cold on the prairies to guarantee that your hatching eggs will make it. So, as the seller, it's your responsibility to know that. But also, the buyer should not be ordering them in the depths of winter unless it's, a pre order. Then that's fine. So, now that we know the seller's responsibility, the buyer's responsibility, let's move into what happens if they don't hatch. We've all been there, especially with shipped eggs. Remember that shipped eggs have a lower hatch rate anyway, right? So take the hatch rate that you might have had from your ducks and cut it in half, at least, because shipping is hard, even if it's done well. Even if the eggs are properly packaged and the box is handled like it's made of glass, and assuming there's no shipping delays, so it gets to your house in 2 days, shipping is still hard on these little tiny embryos. Okay, it is really, really hard on them. So you have to immediately cut your hatch rate in half. If the seller is saying they get an 80% hatch rate at home, you're probably going to get only 40%. Go in with that expectation already in your head because shipped eggs are tough. Okay. I did a video on hatching shipped eggs. So something like, for example, turkeys have a lower hatch rate anyway. Okay. So when you put shipped turkey eggs in your incubator, you're lucky if any of them hatch at all. So know that about shipping eggs. Okay. Let's assume you know all of that. Let's assume the buyer's done the right thing and they have shipped the eggs properly, or they didn't ship the eggs at all. Maybe they got picked up at the farm. So let's assume the buyer's done everything right. Okay. And let's assume the seller's done everything right. What happens if the eggs don't hatch? Okay. So let's assume you bought a dozen hatching eggs from me. And you take those hatching eggs and you put them in your incubator, and 3 weeks later, no babies. Well, what is the proper thing to do here? And this is where I'll tell you the evolution of how I handled things and how I got to, I'm not even selling hatching eggs anymore. Let's talk about that. So, when I first started breeding silkies, I would sell silky hatching eggs. No problem. And generally, people were getting a pretty good hatch rate. Okay. Then I had somebody get a bad hatch rate and say, well, they want replacement eggs. I guess. I mean, that's not normal. Everyone's had pretty good hatch rates, so I'll give you some free eggs. So they came and they got their free eggs. Then, 2 days after they picked up those eggs, and bear in mind, this person did not have silkies before. They were looking to get into silkies because they'd never had them before, but they were so, so cute. And they had bought from my white and partridge pen. So, 2 days after they pick up these replacement hatching eggs, I didn't ask for any proof. I just said, sure. 2 days later, I see their ad selling silky chicks, white and partridge. I'm like, that's odd. And then 3 weeks later, she messages me again saying they didn't hatch either. I want my money back. At this point, I was suspicious, but I gave her money back. I was suspicious, but I gave her money back. And then she had more white and partridge chicks for sale. I was robbed there of 2 dozen hatching eggs. And to be clear, I was selling my hatching eggs for $40 a dozen. She essentially stole $80 from me. So I don't care if you want to hatch them and sell them. You're allowed to be doing that. But you took 2 dozen eggs from me. So, I was a little bit burned. I'm like, okay, well, maybe next time I'll ask for proof, right? Pictures. I take pictures of the eggs before they leave me. When they don't hatch, take a picture. So then I can at least look and go, well, those 12 eggs probably came from me because they look the same. So I implemented that. And that worked. I had one other person one time had a bad hatch rate. They sent me pictures. I sent it back. I sent them their money back. I'm like, okay, whatever. It happens once. In hindsight, I wouldn't do that now. So we'll get there. So then I had somebody put eggs in an incubator. Now, this is sounding like everybody's having a problem, but you have to remember I was selling probably to 50 to 60 customers a year at that point for hatching eggs, not for eating eggs. So we're talking over the course of 3 years, I had about 4 or 5 people with a problem. And that's out of about between 2 and 300 people. So that's not bad. There goes a turkey. So that's not bad. So occasionally a person has a problem. Okay. So then I had somebody else. They didn't get any eggs to hatch. Okay. There's turkey over there now. They didn't get any eggs to hatch. Okay. I asked some questions. I'm like, okay, instead of giving automatic refunds or giving you free hatching eggs, I want some information first. Maybe I can help you troubleshoot what went wrong. I said, what did you do with the eggs after you got them? Well, I went to work, and this is what I referenced earlier. I went to work and I left them in my back seat so that they wouldn't get damaged. Uh-huh. Sorry, a fly. Do you park inside? She's like, no, of course not. It was summer. It was June, late June in Canada. And just to understand how hot it gets, we have had some June temperatures that are just shy of 40 degrees Celsius, which is just shy of 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a hot summer. So she left her eggs in the back seat of a car that was sitting out in the sun all day while she was at work. You wonder why your eggs didn't hatch. You get some chickens that way. Turkey. So that's when I told her, you know what? I am not comfortable with replacement eggs or refunding you because you damaged the eggs by letting them sit in your car. Okay? So I didn't refund those eggs. The next person I didn't refund was somebody who had that $20 incubator off of Temu. And they were like, well, none of the eggs hatched. Okay, show me a picture of your incubator. That's the problem, isn't it? That incubator sucks. It is well known. It's the cheapest incubator you can find. And it is well known to have very bad hatch rates. And you are putting eggs that you paid $40 for in those. I have no problem. People want to use those incubators. My sister has one. She's happy if 1 or 2 chicks hatch. She doesn't care. They're from her own flock. But if you're going to invest the money into buying hatching eggs, you need to make sure that you have an incubator capable of getting you your money's worth. Now, I use Brinsea. You don't have to, right? You do not have to use Brinsea. There are other good brands. I prefer Brinsea. They are one of the most expensive. They are also some of the best. And I used to use the cheap ones, but I eventually invested in those because if I'm taking myself seriously as somebody who breeds and sells chicks, then I need to have an incubator that at least will help me do the job. That doesn't mean everything's always perfect. 100% hatch rate on large scales don't happen. Okay. Yes, I could tell you, well, I put 12 eggs in the incubator and they all hatch. That's 100% hatch rate. Yeah, once. So if you're hatching thousands and thousands and thousands of eggs, you are never going to hit the point where you get 100% hatch rate. It's unrealistic. But a decent hatch rate with a good incubator, there you go. You're fine. So at that point, I had decided, you know what? I'm just not going to sell hatching eggs. I'm going to sell only chicks. Only chicks. Because at least the chicks are hatched and alive. So, the point of this video, first of all, why don't I sell hatching eggs? That's why. It was just dealing with the people who couldn't hatch them, or they decided to follow a weird practice, had a bad incubator, left them in their car. It was annoying. Okay? So I just stopped selling hatching eggs. So should a seller replace eggs if the buyer tells them they didn't hatch? I would say in general, no. Okay? So if you are a seller, I wouldn't sweat it too much. Okay? They might blast you a little bit on social media. Hi, Lonesome. It's chicken. But they might blast you a little on social media. I wouldn't sweat it too much. Okay? Don't worry about it. Just let it go. But the exception I might make is if this person has been a customer before, let's say they've bought eggs from you to hatch 3, 4, or 5 times, and every time they've had an excellent hatch rate, and then they come back and they go, this one batch did not hatch. Okay? This one batch, I only got 1 chick or I got 0 chicks. I would then troubleshoot with them and figure out if I could what went wrong. Okay. You use the same incubator you always used? Were you monitoring the temperature and humidity? Did you store the eggs correctly like you always have? You would go through these things, right? And assuming everything is the same as it's always been, then maybe there actually was a problem with the eggs. It can happen. And at that point, I would offer another batch of hatching eggs. I would not offer a refund. I got burned a couple of times doing that. So, if you're just starting out and you have hatching eggs for sale, I would not offer a refund. I would offer replacement eggs if that's a long-standing customer. If you're a buyer, you should not demand free eggs. Okay? If they offer, take the seller on the offer. If they go, you know what, I'd love to offer you a batch of free eggs. Okay, take it up. Let them ship them. Go pick them up, whatever. But don't demand it. Because if you demand free eggs, you are the bad actor. Because most people selling hatching eggs don't have any ulterior motives, okay? They are not trying to scam you out of 40 bucks. Okay? They are not. And if they were shipped eggs, hear me now, do not ask for refund or replacement. The seller has no control over what happened to those eggs in shipping. Okay? If you are a seller, I would not replace or refund for a customer unless they were a long-standing customer. If you are a buyer, I would not request a refund or replacement, but I would tell the seller, okay? It is a good idea to let the seller know. I like letting sellers know no matter what my hatch rate was. If I bought a dozen hatching eggs and I got 10 babies, I let them know. I let them know I got 10 babies. Excellent experience. And if you're, so in my country, we have a poultry breeder review Facebook group, and we go there and leave reviews. So I leave a good review. Leave as many good reviews as you leave bad reviews. Okay. Don't only leave a review when you have a bad experience. That's disingenuous and it makes people look worse than they are. So if you're a buyer, just zip it. Okay. Most of the time, you should just not ask. It is okay to tell them, and you should tell them, hey, I bought these eggs from you and I only got one chick out of the deal, just so you know. That's okay. But being there, give me my money back. You took the risk. There is no guarantee with hatching eggs. Anyone who guarantees a hatch rate is selling something, okay? You can't guarantee a hatch rate. I could send you home with the most fertile eggs in the world, well fertilized, strong hens, strong roosters, and they just might not. You might just got bad luck, right? It's luck of the draw. You might just have gotten 12 bad eggs. Bad eggs happen. So, yeah. Definitely, you are going to want to let the seller know that you got a bad hatch rate, but don't demand a refund. And I know this one causes a lot of arguments in those online Facebook groups, but it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. This one should be pretty common sense. If they are generally a good actor, they're generally a good seller, then you just got luck of the draw. It's the way it is, right? So, luck of the draw. Very sad, but it happens. So that's my 2 cents on that particular topic. You can, of course, adopt any policies you want if you were a seller. I don't sell hatching eggs anymore. I got tired of the customers. Even if it's just a couple a year, it's annoying. Yeah, it's annoying. But I adore the people who do sell hatching eggs because that's what I buy, which sounds a little hypocritical. I won't sell hatching eggs, but I want to buy them. It's fine to be a little hypocritical in that department. Anyway, that is about it for us here today at Andersen Acres. Drop a comment below if you have an idea for what kind of farm fights episodes you might want to see. We'll see you tomorrow.